When this man's involved in a project, it's got to be good. I mean, he's doing so much in the business. And I'll tell you what, TNA wrestling is on a surge right now. I think part of that is because of Scott D'Amore. Now, Scott D'Amore is doing his own thing, Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling. It's incredible. It's just, I got to have him talk about it some more. We talked about it. He's got some events coming up, MLP Mayhem, March 14th and 15th at St. Clair College. Then he's got another big event, MLP Wrestling Northern Rising, May 11th at the former Maple Leaf Gardens. That's history right there. That's history. And I believe you can see these on Triller TV, and we'll talk about that and how you can see Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling. Thank you so much, as always, Scott. Tell us about the shows that are coming up, especially the MLP Mayhem.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're sitting here on the verge of the return here with MLP Mayhem. It's our follow-up to our debut with Forged in Excellence. We were so proud of the events we were able to put on there last October there at Forged in Excellence, and really I think set the table for what can be a great 2025 and future for MLP Wrestling. And you look at Mayhem. I mean, I think we've got a great card stacking up. When you look at it, we've already you've got representatives right now from the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, including its world's heavyweight champion in a title defense. You've got Kaito Kiyomiya from Noah. You've got people from New Japan Pro Wrestling. You've got people from AEW. You've got Mo Jabari defending the Jericho Crew's Oceanic title, right? I just think there's so much coming together here, which is a big part of what wrestling is these days, like you alluded to with TNA and things that are going on there, and big part, they've got that relationship with WWE that is just something that never would have been considered before. So, I mean, I've long been a believer. I think before there was many of them, Jeff Jarrett and myself were touting collaboration is king. And the more people work together, the better it can be for everybody. And I think MLP Mayhem here coming up is a great example of that. People coming together from all over the world, all different companies in one spot to have two great nights of wrestling action.
I mean, you've been a part of many shows, but I still want to ask it this way. MLP Wrestling, it's new, it's fresh, it's doing its thing. Did you learn anything from the first show?
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest takeaways was, in Impact TNA, we always say, hey, we're really, undermanned when it comes to human resources, right? Like manpower is low. But I mean, it's nothing like starting from scratch. And there's so many things in an organization, even as lean run as Impact or TNA Wrestling is at times with the amount of people. There's so many things that just get done because you've been doing it for 20 plus years and it gets done automatically, that we had to sit there and go, oh, there's things that would be like, well, that. And then we're like, well, we never assigned anybody to do that. So you think a lot of the big things, right? You have to have the guy in your director's chair. You have to have your producer. You have to have your video editors and all these things. But sometimes you forget about things like who's going to go pick up the printing order, with all the formats. So
I'll tell you what, I've been to many indie shows. I go to a lot of indie shows, more back then than now, but I still try to go in South Florida and Central Florida. And it's funny because not recently, but I remember back then, they would always forget steps to the ring. Somebody would always, and then you'd have to forget chair. Oh, did we get the step? Oh, we have to then they'd put a steel chair or something there so people can step to go in the ring.
Yeah, there's things, and I think I thought we did an amazing job this past October at Forged in Excellence. We somehow the whole crew, excuse me, the whole crew came to thank you. The whole crew came together, and when these obstacles came up, we overcame them. So it was just those little things that as you're putting a new team together, even though a lot of the players have worked together in the past, this is the first time together as this team. So tackling everything on a 360 basis was daunting, but I'm really proud of how our crew, both on camera and behind it, pulled together.
How did you feel about the response from fans live and then also fans on social media?
Yeah, I think what I saw, and I'm not the biggest social media person. I go out there, I try to monitor it. I want to keep kind of have an idea of what's going on. But I think overall that the fans seem pretty happy. I think there was, very fair. There's some excitement, lots of excitement. I think the matches we gave them last time were so darn good. So darn good. And I'm really proud of how the product looked. I think from a production standpoint, like we truly delivered a broadcast quality event, which is really tough coming out the gates and at this level. And I'm really proud of us doing that. And I think that got acknowledged a lot. People acknowledged how the show looked. They acknowledged how good the quality of the wrestling on the shows was. I mean, look, one of my takeaways was the thing that I saw the most as far as for criticism, and it's a bit of a fair one, is that the show looked like a TNA show. Well, it's in a building that you've seen, TNA Impact Wrestling out of many times. In that venue with the same ring that you've seen the show be in many times, and it's produced and developed by the same lead, myself, and a lot of team members who were part of building that Impact TNA. But I think that it's a fair criticism in the sense, he had a lot of the same things in place, venue and such. But we tried to do what we could. We changed the color scheme a little bit. We put the announcers up on the stage. You'll see more changes when we get into like the show in May at the Madame Entertainment Center, which is or Madame Athletic Center, pardon me, which is the former Maple Leaf Gardens. Right, we'll have a little more space and we'll have a little bit more of a fresh canvas, but. If the biggest criticism coming away is the production wise, the show looks similar to the TNA, then I take that as a compliment because we're an upstart and being compared to a company that's been around 20 plus years and is doing great business to me is a compliment. So thank you.
It's interesting too because we mentioned the collaboration and a lot of collaboration, and it's just why now? How does that, Scott? How does that work? Because in the past, it's been a lot about the companies, the egos. They don't want to be involved with other companies. Somebody up top doesn't want to do that. But it just seems like more and more and more. And not to say that hadn't happened back then, but it just seems like more. Look, Scott, I'm old at this. I mean, I remember back in the day when Eddie Graham and Vince McMahon Sr. were working together to put on shows down here at the Orange Bowl and collaborate, NWA and WWF. So, I mean, it's not like reinventing the wheel. But I'm curious because it just seems to be happening more and more now on a higher level.
Well, I think you hit it perfectly, Jim. When it's not something new, it's something that's came back because I think you saw for decades, you saw territorial lines respected, you saw people working together, and Maple Leaf Wrestling up here was part of that. You could go to Maple Leaf Gardens and you could see the stars of the NWA. You might see Vern Gagne and some come in from the AWA. You'd have Bruno or Bob Backlund and people coming in from WWF or WWF back then, and you'd have people coming from Japan and every place else. So I think really what happened in the early 80s when one individual, Vince McMahon, decided he was going to be the only show, he set and dictated that WWF was the only wrestling. We don't acknowledge other wrestling. And I think as time went on, others saw like, hey, this is the guy who's successful. Let's follow suit. And it's kind of what it became. Everybody playing in their own sandbox. But I think as time went on, I mean, things evolved and what's old is new again. And I think in a world today now where people are so connected, between social media and the digital age and everything else, like you could make an argument in 1986 that somebody in Boston is only seeing WWF wrestling. That's the wrestling they know. Like the other stuff, why acknowledge it? Why let them know it's out there? Unless they're reading the After mags or something, they probably, have no idea what's going on anywhere else. But in this day and age, if you're a wrestling fan, if you're a wrestling fan, these algorithms are going to catch you. You know that there's other companies that exist. If you're a WWE wrestling fan, it's the biggest, most successful, most powerful company. You know there's an AEW. You know there's a TNA. Or you're just living in a very narrow scope in life. But I mean, whether you follow it or not, it's there. So I think it opens up opportunities. You start going, well, these people have an audience, and we have an audience. Can some of our audience join theirs, and theirs join ours? And can you cross pollinate like that? And for the ones that are already following both, we know it's cool, right? Like, how great is it when you get a match that you never thought you were going to see? Like, hey, here's somebody from WWE, and they're facing off with somebody from TNA, or here's somebody from AEW, and they're squaring off with this person from CMLL. All of these things, they're intriguing for fans. They help keep it fresh. Wrestling is 52 weeks a year. And at this point, it's almost 360 days out of the year that there's some form of wrestling. So I think that things that can keep it fresh and keep people engaged are always, always key. And I think the crossovers and cross promotions and collaborations and everything help do that.
Well, with Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling in Canada, how do you feel about helping grow that part that we just talked about, the collaborations, and you mentioned others coming in from other companies on your shows, and how do you not go too fast? Is there still, Scott, a way now? Do you have to go fast now because of social media, or can you still just grow this organically and get it out there slowly? What's your thought about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of the times there's so much excitement and let's get going, let's get going, let's get going. At the end of the day, it was just over a year ago that I was still, up to my eyeballs in TNA wrestling. It's only been 6 months really since we announced Maple Leaf Pro. It's only been a handful of months. What's it been? 4 and change months since we had our debut event. And already we have the Mayhem here on the books coming up on the 14th and 15th, this coming weekend. And we've got Return to Maple Leaf Gardens, which is so important for us to reconnect with our history there. I think it's important that we remember to measure twice and cut once. Because in all the excitement, yeah, let's go do this, let's run events. And we had great people, not just like, sometimes you get these emails and you're like, I don't even know who this is. Getting emails and getting contacted from really good people from coast to coast, from Vancouver through the prairies, all the way out east in the Maritimes, with people that want to say, hey, how can we do this? How can we do events here? How can we be part of this? How do we grow this? And all of that's exciting. But, you got to sometimes step back and be a little bit cautious in the sense that, we're going to make mistakes, but let's make calculated mistakes. And let's crawl before we walk and walk before we run. So I think coming back here, this later this week and Mayhem here in Windsor, I think it's a great second, set of events or 2-day event for us. And it sets the table for a really important moment in our history, because in May, Northern Rising at the Mattamy Athletic Center, the former Maple Leaf Gardens. Like, I just went and did the site survey there a few days ago. That exterior is still the same. It's still that yellow brick. There's still that big, beautiful marquee that says Maple Leaf Maple Leaf Gardens. And then when you walk into it, although it's different, right? Because the arena is now on the 3rd floor. You're only seeing what used to be the top of the building. Like, I walked in, it actually kind of took my breath because I looked up and it's that same roof. It's that same iconic group from Maple Leaf Wrestling that I walked in and saw for the first time as a child. So I think for a lot of people, my age, maybe a little younger, more so older, it's a chance to come back and relive some amazing memories you have. And most importantly, or more importantly, share those moments with the next generation. Because I say, when we do wrestling, when we do what we do right, we create moments and we create memories. And you look at what WWE did with John Cena and The Rock, and that to me is the perfect type of situation. There's people, kids, but also adults, are going to remember that moment forever. Like I said it to somebody the other day. I'll never forget the clothesline heard around the world when Paul Orndorff, pulled Hulk Hogan in on that clothesline and laid him out, right? Like my whole world came crashing down, right? I mean, I know exactly where I was sitting in the room. I could go to the point on the floor where the TV was. And I remember just walking around outside because I saw it on a Saturday, 11 o'clock it shows. So it's like, the show ends at noon and I'm just wandering around my backyard. Like like life as I know it is over. Those are the moments, right? And there's some kids, I'm sure, that saw that look on Cena's face and saw Rock and then went, Like that's a moment they're gonna remember forever. And whether they saw it with their friends or one of their parents or an uncle or a big brother or big sister or whatever, there's that shared bond now that for the rest of the life, these people will have. So I think we have an opportunity to do that here. Because that's what we do best in wrestling, in general. And then specifically, we've got a strong mandate to make sure that Canadian wrestlers have an opportunity to be showcased. Because sometimes that doesn't happen. And Bret Hart, when he first, was at the very top as a talent, one of the things he did is start facilitating training and opportunities for Canadians. And that's how we got Edge and Christian and so many other people. It's because a guy who had been there took the time and the energy to help others. And I mean, I'm not Bret Hart. I'm nowhere near Bret Hart. I don't claim to be, but I've been very blessed in this business. And if I can be part of putting together a team that helps the next generation, that's really important. I remember at Abyss's Hall of Fame induction at Impact, one of the most powerful moments to me at the end of a great speech is he's like, when you reach the top of that mountain, you remember you reach down and you extend a hand to pull up the next person. And I think that we have an opportunity to proudly be Canadian, to feature Canadians, hand in hand, side by side, in partnership and competition with the very best talent in the world. And it gives those Canadians a chance to show that they belong on that stage. And then it also gives them a chance to be in a system where they're getting feedback and positive reinforcement, some critiques on what can be done better, and it's going to help craft what they need to do to move to that next level. So I think that we have a great 2025 ahead of us.
Wow, there is so much to digest and all that, really, Scott. And I'll try to do a few things here in one. It's interesting because when you talk about Maple Leaf Garden and now it's the Mattamy Athletic Center, but you're talking about how when you look and you see the roof, I mean, things like that. And it's like, oh, wow, this is really getting real. I'm curious because with social media, those young fans, so you say, yeah, the old fans will remember. They were there, but the young fans never been. They don't know what it's like. But there's so much on social media. I don't know how much for Maple Leaf Gardens, but there's a chance they might be able to find something back in the day. So now younger fans can still watch or can watch the old school stuff, and that impacts them to be a part of this as well. With that, Scott, if you could touch on that a little bit, and then also this part of it. Are you going to try? No Don Jardine alerts here. No Don Jardine alerts here. But do you think you might get some former wrestlers from back in the day to appear on that show? Is a thought process of that just being as a guest on the show?
Yeah, I guess to the first question, my analogy is this: as far as for people being able to go there, see it, be part of it, and then go back and look at the history. At a time when there was no social media or anything like that, when the primary source of info was newspapers and radio and television, I as a child, I got to go to the Joe Louis Arena in 1980. For what I just knew, I just go into a hockey game. I'd gone to Red Wing games before. I was a kid. It was exciting. But I remember the crowd standing up and cheering, like on their feet for what seemed like eternity. Because as a kid, a minute is 10 minutes and 4 minutes is 2 hours. And I just like, what is going on? And as I was pointing out what they're cheering for Gordy. Well, who is Gordy? Well, that guy right there, Gordie Howe. And I'm like, as a 6-year-old kid, I don't really understand who Gordie Howe is. But as I become, somebody who grows to love hockey and I start reading and learning the history, well, then I have such an appreciation for who Gordie Howe is. Obviously, I developed that. And then now I have this attachment where I have this memory in my heart where I didn't know what it was at the time. But now for the rest of my life, I realized I got to be part of one of the most iconic moments in Detroit sports history when a 52-year-old Gordie Howe returned to Detroit back in the NHL with the Hartford Whalers. So we have a chance to create those moments, and they're so powerful. So I'm very excited about that opportunity to do that. And then, like you said, now people can go, whether they go to the Maple Leaf Pro YouTube or go to others, because there's other people that have Maple Leaf Wrestling stuff up there. We haven't done any takedown protocols on anybody, because as far as we're concerned, if you're looking to share the history of Maple Leaf Wrestling, we want it shared. We want to get it out there, and if you're sharing it, we want that there. So people have that opportunity. As far as for getting former Maple Leaf Wrestling talent, it's certainly something we're hoping to do. We've been looking at it. It's been a little tough because there's not a lot of them that are still out there. And when you talk about going back to really the 70s, early 80s at the most recent, you're dealing with some of the people we've chatted to that would love to come just physically. It's a trip they're not up to making. So I'm hoping we're going to get out there, and regardless of who was actually in that building that night, there will definitely be a moment and a time where we honor that rich history. Right, that building opened up in 1931, 1 year after what became known as Maple Leaf Wrestling started, and wrestling was in that building consistently from 1931, to 1984, and then even in '84, the WWF kept running wrestling there until the late 90s. So there's so much history there, and we're definitely going to take a moment to honor that history and let it sink in.
And I think too, Scott, and you probably maybe even thought of something like this. You could even do a video package. You could even do, if they're up to it, you could even maybe get them to send a, hey, everybody, hello, enjoy the show, and something short or something too, if they can't physically make it. And there are some other options there. I think when you have something like that down here, whether it was Eddie Graham, the Sportatorium, the Ford Homer Hesterly Armory in Tampa, or something like that, and if they're able to do something back then and tie it into now, when you have places like that, it really lends itself not only the old school fans but to the new fans as well. So just something real. I was really, really happy to see that when I was looking on the website there for Maple Leaf Pro, and so I was like, oh, this is cool. This will be so cool. They're coming back there. The St. Clair College show will be cool too, the second one, but then going back there is just going to be something really cool and all. So I'm glad you all are doing that. And I'm curious, Scott, commentary team, amazing for that first show. What is your commentary team going to look like moving forward?
Well, we're definitely confirmed for Mayhem and for Northern Rising. We've got Mauro Ranallo. He's the voice of Maple Leaf Pro, and the grumpy man Don Callis has agreed to. The most hated man in professional wrestling has agreed to return, and he'll be there both at Mayhem as well as at Northern Rising. So that's our team for the foreseeable future, and we're excited to have what we think is the in my humble opinion, with no disrespect to anybody, the best classic pro wrestling style announce team out there. A great play-by-play guy who's arguably the best in the world at any combat sport that's out there, and a true heel. Your Bobby Heenan, Jesse Ventura, whoever you want, your Roddy Piper and Georgia Championship, whoever you want to relate him to. You've got an amazing person who has a different kind of angle on how he sees things and how he describes them, but still does it with being mindful of not taking away from the talent in the ring, but actually adding to the talent in the ring. That's why I think the two of them are the best.
And talent, obviously, is so important, and what you see in the ring, but also so important, as you mentioned, the look. Like you're saying, the look. You were at St. Clair College. Okay, TNA Wrestling was there. But we'll trying to do things a little different with the look and all. But then that commentary team is still so ultra important. I think keying on these things is really what sets itself to bringing the show to another level. And you guys have that. What a commentary team. I'm just so glad that you guys that team is maintaining itself moving forward. I'll ask you a few more questions to wrap this up. Scott, I always appreciate the time that you're able to give to me, but also to pro wrestling. And I see what's out there today, and you are a humble guy. I understand that and all, but I think what we're seeing today, part of it can be attributed to what you've been able to do in the business, and especially lately with TNA Wrestling. What is curious to me for that part of it is, did you know that WWE and TNA were interested in collaborating when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, I was, I was right there at first contact. So, it's why I was, we had done Mickey in the Rumble, which was one thing. We had done Jordan in the Rumble, which was even better because Mickey transcends whatever company she's with, right? She's a legend. Jordan was a TNA, Impact homegrown talent that we got to feature in the Rumble there, and even around that and that period in time, by that point we had already started some conversations about what could be next. So I've always thought that the idea of collaborating made sense. I think it's not just a win-win. It's not just a win for WWE to have a place to send talent and to have some crossover. It's not just a huge win for TNA to be able to have that additional exposure and rub, as we call it, from being associated with WWE or more so NXT. The fans win because, like we talked about, you get to see the Hardys, walk into the Capitol Center there for WWE, or to, be on the NXT broadcast, and you get to see these things. And I think it's a no-brainer. And you just saw recently, Natalia is going to be at
NWA.
Bloodsport, and then she's going to be at NWA at the Crockett Cup, and those type of things are huge, right? Though you saw AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura in Noah in the last year competing, so you're starting to see like those. You're starting to see a lot of those walls come down. You're starting to see a lot more crossover, and I think it's about time.
And Scott, it's so interesting these days too, because we're seeing shows like WWLFG, WWE Evolve, and Gabe Sapolsky involved with them. And it's just, what an interesting time. And when you see shows like that, you mentioned the collaboration, like with TNA Wrestling and WWE, it gives their young developing talent more reps. And I think a lot of this with these young talent, new shows, young talent, reps. That's what everyone needs. I'm curious, in Canadian wrestling up there, how are the schools up there? You're bringing something back because you see a need for the Canadian wrestlers in the Canadian area. Are they growing? Is Canadian wrestling growing these days?
I think there's some great talent out there on the scene. I think there's some really good places to go learn. I think what we're missing, and this kind of ducktails into what you're talking about with LFG and Evolve and everything else. See, there's the saying that practice makes perfect. The practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And there's only so much you can learn in a training center. What we do, you have to learn in a ring in front of a crowd and out there and doing game day reps, as we used to call them. And I think one of the shortfalls we've had in the business is there hasn't been enough places where you're getting those reps in a controlled environment, where I talked about, where you're being directed, you're getting an opportunity to not just there's wrestling promos, which sometimes are really fun, and in a lot of ways at times are passe. And that look into the camera and I'm coming for you, blah 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 blah. That's an important skill to have, but this right here is an important skill as well. Like the sit down interviews, the comments, the being able to get real, being able to relate emotion and talk about yourself. Those are important skills. How you present yourself, from your look, everything from your haircut to your gear to how you carry yourself, how you pose on the stage. All of these are part of your performance, outside of the bells, that are still so very important to you connecting to an audience. And I think with a lot of independents, it's like, hey, go out there, have a match, go this long, don't go in the crowd or cuss or something. You're getting some bare, but I don't think you're getting that hands-on, produced, crafted, coached type of environment, which is where you're really going to develop talent. So that's where I see, that's where that was why NXT was developed, and then they realized that's just enough. So now you're going to have LFG. Now you're going to have Evolve. Now you're going to have the WWE ID program. Like on this show, we have an official WWE ID matchup on the show with Kylie Ray and Joey Sager. I think anything that provides structure and a situation where people are being produced a little while still being given freedom to grow, and then getting constructive feedback on the backside is so very important. Like I think Jim, I think if I recall, you follow a lot of baseball, right?
Yes.
And a Major League Baseball team doesn't just have one minor league affiliate. They have a triple A team. They have a double A team. They probably might have 2 or 3 A teams. They'll have a rookie ball team. They might have something down in the Caribbean, or something in the South there for winter ball. You have all of these teams because you want your players. You don't just want them going out and swinging a bat. You want them going out there and swinging a bat against a competitive pitcher in a competitive game, and in a situation where the coach is saying, hey, look, you need to get your hands out a little more front. Hey, your hips are getting a little ahead of your swing. Like these type of things, both in live action and then also going back and tape review and reviewing. You need that type of development. And I think that's the type of stuff when you look at it, and hats off to Triple H and everybody there at the WWE, what they're building out. You've got WWE. Now you've got NXT. From NXT, and honestly, I don't know the order, but you have the LFG, and you have Evolve, and even below that, hey, these people aren't ready for WWE, but we think they might be. Let's ID them and let's help support them and see if they develop into somebody we want to have here. So I think they've really flushed out quite a development program there. So that's impressive, and I think it's something that's long overdue.
And Scott, I'll wrap this up with a couple more questions, and I appreciate your time. I really do. And it's interesting too, in the sense with Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, this is a legitimate pro wrestling company. So how do you distinguish between making it that and not being developmental? Or do you also want to be developmental too, to other places like WWE?
I think we have to be realistic about what we are. And I think part of what we are is that we are a place that's developing talent. That's part of our mandate, is to showcase and develop talent. So we very much understand that there may come a time we might spend, time and effort developing 2 talents. We might have them work, a series of matches, an angle, a feud, or whatever you want to call it. And we might end up with one or both of those talents signed away. And that's what we'll have to deal with. And hopefully we can wrap things up storyline wise and everything else. But at the end of the day, our mandate is to showcase and develop talent so that they can move on to a higher level. So I think by our very definition, we are developmental. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that that's one of the things that TNA at times has struggled with, is the fact that TNA is a great promotion, but they're not equal to WWE. They're not even close. What they are is a good place where people go, they earn a living, they develop further, and some of them are going to get the opportunities to move on to a higher level. And there's nothing wrong with that. That can be celebrated and embraced. And I think us, not saying we're at that same level as TNA, but similar in the sense that if we're doing our job right, our talent's going to end up in WWE and AEW. If we're doing our job right, they're going to get those call-ups. The same thing for TNA. You look at the TNA talent that succeeds, it's either it's a Deonna Purrazzo who comes in off of a not great run, who gets to have that run and gets to get her, we build her confidence back up. We work with her and build something that then gets to move back up to a higher level with a better chance of success. Or it's a Josh Alexander or a Jordan Grace coming in fresh off the street. And, Josh with many, many years of toiling away on indies without opportunity, because talent without opportunity equals nothing. And Jordan, who was very young when we first brought her in and worked with her, and you see how she developed. And I mean, we just are tools that can be used and help the talent develop. They have to go do the work. But I look at my time in TNA, one of the things I'm most proud of is the talent we were able to develop and graduate, so to say, up to, bigger opportunities, bigger exposure, bigger money. And anybody who doesn't want to see their talent grow and succeed at a higher level, then I think is probably, needs to look in the mirror and decide whether they're doing it just for themselves or whether they're doing it for the business and for the people around them.
And Scott, piggybacking on that, it's interesting because I know back in the day, there were a lot of I can't say a lot because I don't know them all, but there were indie promotions that they were upset if a talent went and worked for somebody else, even a higher promotion. Hey, what are you doing working there? I understand champions and the respect the title and all that, but even if not, it was like one of those things where it was more about their company and their thing on the indies, and not about, hey, if that person gets there, we could say, hey, we had this talent, we helped them grow, look what they were able to do now. And so I think that dynamic is much needed, because wrestlers want to do that. Wrestlers want to continue to evolve and grow their game and go to other places. It's so important. And the companies can help them do that. So with your company, Maple Leaf Pro, I'm so glad to hear that. And I figured that was the case because we talked about it before. But egos can get in the way sometimes. Egos can still get in the way sometimes. So I'm glad that that's really the premise for Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling and doing that. I think it's going to help the wrestlers grow. I think it helped your company grow as well. And then I'll end it with this, because, well, you mentioned some of the talent like Jordan Grace, Deanna Prazo, now Joe Henry, Moose, incredible. Josh Alexander, I'll tell you what, with Josh, him and Ethan Page, outstanding tag team. Ethan goes and does this thing. I'm like, well, Ethan's going to be a star. Ethan's going to be a star. I never saw that coming with Josh Alexander. That was amazing. Kudos to him and you all with that, because that was just incredible. So here's the thing, though, but I wanted to make that comment, and I wanted to end with this. Have you seen Queen of the Ring? Are you going to go see it if not?
I haven't seen it yet. Haven't had the opportunity, but I do look forward. And absolutely, I'm going to see it. Yeah, I think I mean, look, I love wrestling history. I think that it's funny. I remember in WWE developmental at one point, they tested the developmental talent on wrestling history, and they all flunked terribly. And that's disappointing to me. I think anyone who's in this business should study the history. You know, you don't have to know all the ins and outs and the dates, but you need to know the players and the history and what worked and what didn't, and just what got us here. And that's how I approached it with baseball. I mean, you know, like the deep dives I did into the Ty Cobbs and the Honus Wagners and the Babe Ruths and the Lou Gehrigs and the Trent Speakers and everything else. It's like I wanted to know that history right up through, you know, your DiMaggios and your Mantles and everything else, right? Your Hank Aaron's and your Willie Mays. You know, it's funny. You'll appreciate this. One of my favorite books when I was young, and I loved baseball, played baseball, followed it religiously, was a book, Say Hey, about Willie Mays. And I mean, I read the book probably 10 times. It's how I really it's what really got me super interested in Willie Mays. And I didn't know until last year when I looked at the cover, when I pulled it off the shelf, it was written by Lou Zahati, David Zahati's father, Papa Lou. My favorite book of my childhood, written by one of my best friend's fathers, and I had no idea.
What did you just say? Did you talk to him about it then after?
Yeah, I sent a picture to David. I was like, is this Papa Lou? And he was shocked that I didn't know. So it's so great. But I think, look, history is so important, is my point. And, you know, I think that anybody that wants to be in this business should pay attention to it, should follow it, should learn it, because then they can ultimately become part of that history.
The Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays. I'll tell you what, they say 5-tool player. That guy was like a 10-tool player, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
Well, that he was just amazing. The Giants, then the Mets, just one of the best of all time with Say Hey Kid. See, I wore spring training Florida style today. I wore my spring training shirt and all, a little baseball, but mainly the hockey, because of Canada. I got all the hockey, and I would have put more baseball stuff up. And then I got Finkel from Ace Ventura, Jim Carrey's Canadian.
Yeah.
So I threw that in there too. I was trying to get some things.
Now you should need to get me a Celtics logo up there somewhere.
Oh no, I can't. Miami Heat, I can't do that. Scott, are you kidding me? I'd be kicked out of South Florida.
Fair game.
I have to. I know. I'm gonna let you go. Really, but this has been so cool, so fun. I always enjoy talking to you. I'm curious with this, and I have a bunch of things written down. We'll go over more later another time. Listen, I don't want to get political. No, that's not my point. But pop culture and politics, y'all are having shows in Canada. Will you try to maybe do a little stirring of the pot with this Canada-USA stuff that's going on? Because we saw the hockey games, Canada-USA, they were booing the national anthem. I don't want to get into that part of it, but I just meant as far as like, oh, maybe we could stir the pot a little bit with a U.S. talent, a Tom Latimer or Rich Swann or somebody.
Yeah, I mean, look, Real quick. I cringed with the crowd booing the U.S. anthem, because if you got a problem with an individual, have a problem with that individual. Don't boo something that represents. And I say this saying everybody has a right to express themselves however they choose. Just my opinion. You don't need to boo something like a national anthem that stands for a country, that is our closest neighbor, our closest ally, our biggest trading partner, in many ways our big brother when it comes to military and everything else. And make no bones about it, Canada's been a great neighbor and partner to the US. But don't take it out on the country, and don't rile up Americans that are like, there's so many proud Americans out there, and whether they serve for their country or not, that take pride in the country and everything America stands for. You don't need to lash out against that. If you got a problem with an individual, lash out against that individual, not the country, and certainly not the people that have stood up for it. So that aside, will we lean into it? It's wrestling. If we can do it in a fun, non-political way, of course. But what we don't want to fuel the flames of political or social discourse, right? If it's fun, hey, sure, if booing an American heel is different than booing America. Just like we had so much fun with Team Canada with us being the bad guys, right? Like it wasn't that we disliked all of us were so blessed and happy to be in the US. We just played our role of the quote unquote, as we called it, the evil Canadians, right? You're not going to have Bolsheviks and German soldiers or whatever else we've had over the years running around. But if you can have somebody in Toronto, that's wearing the red, white, and blue and talking down Canada and everything here, if there's a way to do it in a non-political way, we're open. And if there's not, we'll just steer clear and just focus on good wrestling.
That's great. And I remember when Bret Hart and they all made an alliance in WWE back then too with Canada and all. It can. And right. And I totally agree with that. You can push the envelope a little bit, but make it fun, make it interesting, but don't go so political on it. No need for that and all. So, but I just thought it'd be interesting to share that and all, because of what is going on in that hockey game, because pro wrestling has done that for years, but not to that level, not on a political type level with one person per se. Maybe one time with Russia and WWF when the Attitude Era, they were doing some things, but more times than not, it's been parlayed and it's a role, it's a character. So I'm glad we got to talk that. Thank you. And then Scott, your shows are coming up, Triller TV. Just I'll let you close it out about your shows, where people can watch, the website, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. People can go to MLPwrestling.com for any of the information. These shows will be carried live Friday and Saturday night, March 14th, March 15th on Triller TV. It's a great app, super easy to navigate. You have the choice. If you look at it, because we're going to have the full lineups out here shortly. If you look at it and say, you know what? I really want to watch night one, and that's my cap. You can do that, or you can watch night two. It's $20 each for the night. Or if you want both nights, $30, great price for 6 hours of world-class wrestling and supporting a great group of people here that are putting in, just unbelievable work to put these shows together. I think we're going to, if you sit down, if you invest your money, your $30 and pluck and buy this bundle, or if just as importantly, you invest 2 nights of your time, which I don't take lightly, then I guarantee you we're going to give you your money's worth and more.